much for the opportunity. I appreciate it. My name's Kevin Boggess. I'm running for the school board. I'm someone who was born and raised here in San Francisco. I attended public schools, graduate of the public school system here, both K through 12, as well as City College of San Francisco. After my time at City College, I went to Atlanta, where I graduated from Morehouse College with a degree in political science. For about the last 10 years, I've worked at Coleman Advocates, which is a education equity organization in San Francisco that works with youth and parents to lead campaigns to transform their schools to address the issues that they're facing. And the reason I'm running for the Board of Ed is because I want to make sure that our school district is working for all the families and that we have a much more responsive school district than we have now. A lot of families, a lot of students feel unheard, and when they have an issue or a concern, they don't actually get a chance to see it resolved during that school year or ever. So, what I really want to do is go and kind of shift the balance of power and allow families and educators and the folks in the classroom to really have more input on the decisions that are being made at the district-wide level, and really make sure that those decisions are centered on what our students need to be successful. I have a vision for our schools where we could have the best public school system in the nation. I'd love to see all of the students who graduate from our school district graduate college ready and with financial aid support to help them go to the college of their dream. And for me, I'm really about how do we bring people together, how do we work together, and really center on what works best for the students, and really strengthening the quality of education in our city so that our schools can be as competitive as the private schools that we have here in San Francisco. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks very much for that brief statement. Do we have any questions for Mr. Boggess? Kyle.
Yeah, so in lines with kind of COVID, balanced out against the kind of parents need to, often in the case of kind of low income families, to go to work. What do you consider options for kind of getting the kids in school at least part-time? One example is my brother and sister-in-law work in the school district in LA, and they're working on kids coming in alternate days. So you cut the class size in effect in half, and then half of them are seeing the same class through Zoom, and half of them are there. Do you have any ideas along those lines for what can actually be done? I mean, if you're rich, well, you can send your kids to some daycare and it doesn't matter. But, if both parents are working minimum or just above minimum wage jobs, their choices are really limited.
Yeah, no, I think really appreciate the question. I think that's a really good point. And I think what the district is trying to do, so once we're kind of out of this shelter in place moment again, they're going to try to do a hybrid model, kind of similar to what you mentioned is going down in LA, which is something I support. I also think there's also the realization that during this time, a lot of parents are co-teaching, and how are we like recognizing that and honoring that, as well as like the energy and resources that are kind of being expensed from families right now that they're not being compensated for. So I do think like one thing that this crisis has highlighted is as much as schools are about education, they're also about childcare. And how do we find a way to balance that need in a way that's safe? The city's distance learning hubs, I think, are a small attempt to do that for elementary school students. But I definitely feel like we need to have a more robust conversation and allow people's personal safety to kind of determine when we're able to kind of get them back at school, and make sure that for people who aren't ready to go back, they also have options that don't prevent them from graduating on time to still be successful.
Okay, thanks for that. Any other questions?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. I noticed in your response for special education students that you actually have a really good plan laid out for for ESL programs. But like I ask others, what because of COVID and the bad economy, there's probably going to stand a good chance that that resource specialist teachers and paras that teach with them are probably going to have an increase IEP load. And I was just wondering in terms of funding and staffing on how do you have a vision to address that potential reality or crisis.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, that's I think one of like the urgent issues in this moment, and also kind of a long-standing issue in the district of not actually having enough paraprofessionals who support special education students, and a lot of times it's one-on-one, which are what these students' educational plans call for. So I think one thing that I'm really committed to is how do we strengthen up kind of the checks and balances within our special education program to make sure students are getting the things that are required for them to be successful, as well as what are we doing to support students who have, I would say, like milder disabilities to actually kind of transition back into general ed if that's possible, so that they're not kind of permanently stuck, even though we do have people, special education classes kind of embedded in the regular school day. Like, how do we actually get students to kind of be out of the program if they don't need the supports, and are really successful? Having supported families through kind of the special education IEP meetings, just knowing like the difficult place that teachers are in because they don't have enough supports, as well as the place that parents are in because they need a lot of additional support sometimes to support their kids. And we kind of end up in a situation where everyone is trying real hard, but the student is still not getting what they need to be successful. So just really like lifting that up and being more intentional about the individual education plans and that we're fulfilling those for our families.
Great, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? I guess I'll just ask a quick question then about your experience with Coleman Advocates in the district. Could you elaborate a bit about, just give us some personal testimony on that, as well as any other experience with not-for-profit organizations you have working in SFUSD?
Yeah, I volunteered as a football coach for like a season at my old high school after I had graduated.
Which
I
high
believe
school is that?
Thurgood Marshall Academic High School. Yeah. And so at Coleman, I've had a few different positions. I started off in our youth organizing program, working in high schools in the Southeast, essentially developing like a club on campus for students, really with the focus of how do we improve conditions at the school. Some of the things that I've worked on when I was a youth organizer was around credit recovery. This was kind of when we were still recovering from the recession of 2008, and the district had essentially got rid of all their summer school programs and night school classes. So a big part was advocating for that. Since I've been doing the policy position, I've been able to work on issues regarding school suspension, and really help to push the district to move away from suspension as the primary way of dealing with behavioral issues, which essentially led to Black and brown students disproportionately being pushed out of class at really high rates. And even though we've brought down the suspension numbers, we still have a huge amount of disproportionality. Also have been involved in efforts like Vote 16, which is to allow for 16-year-olds to vote, as well as to allow for Proposition N from 2016, which allowed for parents who aren't citizens to be able to vote for school board races, to really just kind of expand the idea around democracy and the people who are most directly affected being engaged. I'd say one of the biggest things I've been a part of has been the Close the Gap Coalition, which is an alliance between some community groups and the labor unions in the district about how we can come together and kind of, as people in the classroom, working together to really solve our problems and not kind of fall into the conflict and conflict and kind of finger pointing that a lot of times happens when the administration tries to pit labor versus community.
Okay, yeah, thanks very much. I appreciate the detail on that response. Any other questions? It seems that's Barry. You have a quick question?
No,
Okay.
I'm good.
All right.
I've enjoyed meeting you.
Erica and John Mark had a question, I believe.
All right. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, just had a quick question if you can stay on for a minute. You mentioned the possibilities of getting together in person in small groups to supplement distance learning. And I was wondering if you had seen the recent Mission Local article about pandemic pods and the school district's response to those, and what you thought about about that in general?
Yeah, I think you might hear my daughter in the background. She's very active. Uh, the pandemic pods create a huge equity concern, but they also create a dynamic where parents want to make sure their kids are getting educated, and I think they're willing to kind of do whatever it takes. So I think it's really on the city and the school district to figure out how to present an option that's equitable and that's grounded in our schools and what they need. And so I think even though they are difficult to ensure equity. It's hard to tell parents that they can't. I know the school district has been supporting, sorry about that, has been supporting some school sites in doing pods based off the classroom so that they have that built-in equity. But I think ultimately, unless the school district can present a plan that parents have faith in, we'll kind of end up with these inequitable pods as kind of the only alternative. Even though I think parents should have the right, we also need to provide a better option that's kind of centered in our values of inclusiveness.
All right. Well, we certainly appreciate that response as well. And
Yeah, given that your
we
daughter
appreciate,
is complaining about it, we'll may leave it there. So.
yeah, it's about the same way a lot of us feel after a long night of interviews, but we certainly do appreciate you taking the time to join us this evening, and your family as well.
Yeah, thank you so much. Have a great evening, everybody.